The war in Ukraine has entered a new phase, one marked by relentless drone strikes, smouldering oil refineries, and an energy war that cripples or threatens to cripple Russia's ability to sustain its so-called special military operation. And meanwhile, Russia's supposed allies, notably North Korea, are making a quiet retreat from the battlefield. Is it a calculated tactical withdrawal or a sheer act of self-preserving cowardice? Russia is burning, literally and figuratively, and in recent weeks, Ukraine has escalated its strikes deep into Russian territory, targeting critical oil refineries, gas processing plants, chemical factories, and reports indicate that 2/3 of Russia's refineries have now been hit, significantly disrupting Moscow's ability to process crude oil into usable fuel. The significance of this cannot be overstated. Oil and gas revenues constitute nearly 1/3 of Russia's government budget, and these strikes are not just a strategic nuisance, but an existential threat to Putin's war economy. Heavens, if Ukraine continues, it will switch off the oil supply entirely, and that means the electricity supply, and Putin's fridge will stop working and Putin will disintegrate. What has enabled Ukraine's growing confidence in these attacks, you might ask? The answer lies in Kyiv's expanding domestic defense industry. No longer fully dependent on Western permission or slow-moving arms deliveries, Ukraine has successfully developed and deployed its own long-range drones. And January marked the moment when the gloves truly came off, and Ukraine's near daily bombardment of high-value Russian infrastructure has exposed Russia's glaring inability to defend its own territory. This is a war of attrition, not through direct military confrontation, but through economic starvation. And these attacks serve multiple strategic objectives. One, to weaken Russia's revenue streams. The Kremlin has been forced to sell crude oil at reduced prices, limiting its war chest. Two, to disrupt military logistics. Russia's military fuel depots and supply chains are now strained, impacting frontline operations. Three, to force Russia to spread its defences by hitting targets deep in Russian territory. Ukraine is forcing Moscow to divert air defences away from the front lines, stretched to an already burdening military apparatus, stretching Russia's capacity to its limit. And four, signalling Western allies that these strikes demonstrate Ukraine's capability and resilience, sending a message to NATO and Western partners that Ukraine remains an active force worthy of continued support. Russia's response has been largely dismissive in official statements, yet behind the scenes, panic is setting in. Reports suggest that these strikes are reducing Russia's refinery output by nearly 10%, forcing Moscow to rely more on crude exports, a much less profitable endeavour. And meanwhile, the economic fallout is visible in rising inflation, with independent analyses suggesting real inflation rates could be as high as 23%. It won't just be butter that's unavailable in the next few weeks. It will be basic goods. And while Ukraine continues its aggressive campaign, another key player is quietly backpedaling, and that's North Korea. Reports indicate that Pyongyang's forces deployed to assist Russia have been missing from the front lines for 2 weeks. And initial assessments suggest that the North Korean units suffered such severe casualties because of disorganization and a lack of coordination with Russian forces that they have effectively retreated. According to Ukrainian intelligence, North Korean troops were essentially abandoned by their Russian compatriots, by their Russian counterparts, by their Russian by the Russian support troops, left to fight without sufficient support. And this raises a crucial question. Is this a tactical withdrawal to reassess, regroup, or is Kim Jong-un cutting his losses to avoid further humiliation on the battlefield? There are a few possible explanations for North Korea's retreat. Firstly, the high casualties and the battleground failure indicate that North Korean soldiers were unprepared and overwhelmed, and unlike Russian conscripts, North Koreans are unfamiliar with Ukraine's terrain and modern warfare tactics. Secondly, if Russian commanders deprioritize North Korean units in their battle planning, Pyongyang may see little benefit in continuing his involvement. Thirdly, the fear of Western retaliation with increasing sanctions targeting Russian allies, Pyongyang may be wary of pushing its luck, especially as the US and South Korea ramp up military cooperation. And fourthly, If Russia itself is struggling to maintain cohesion among its own forces, providing logistical and command support for a foreign contingent like North Korea's may simply not be feasible anymore. US officials caution that this withdrawal may just be temporary and that North Korean troops could return stronger after further training. But if this retreat signals a loss of confidence in Russia's battlefield strategy, it could also mark a deeper rift in Moscow's alliances. The impact of these events is not lost on the Russian populace. While state-controlled media attempts to downplay Ukraine's successes, the economic consequences of refinery attacks are becoming impossible to ignore. Gasoline and diesel shortages are affecting regional supply chains while inflation continues to skyrocket. Moreover, frustration with Putin's leadership is mounting. Public perception of the war is shifting from reluctant acceptance to quiet defiance. The once ironclad support for Putin's special military operation is showing cracks, exacerbated by a growing sense of isolation as Russia's allies either distance themselves or prove unreliable. And meanwhile, Trump's recent remarks threatening hell to pay if Russia refuses to negotiate have rattled the Kremlin. The Kremlin is still discharging propaganda and suggesting that the EU will be wagging its tails for Trump, but that's not enough. Once seen as a potential political asset to Moscow, Trump's evolving stance is now stoking outrage in Russian media as well, further exacerbating internal divisions within Putin's regime. And while Ukraine may not be able to deliver a decisive knockout blow militarily, its relentless strikes are dismantling the foundations of Russia's war economy. Remember Caesar's defeat of Gaul. It wasn't based on one great fight, really. It was based on containment and a siege. The war is no longer being fought on Ukrainian soil. It has come home to Russia in flames, and it is a siege mentality. And at the same time, Russia's once prized alliance with North Korea is showing signs of strain. Whether Pyongyang's retreat is temporary, is just some sort of recalibration, or a deeper strategic withdrawal remains to be seen. But one thing is clear. Russia is increasingly isolated, militarily stretched, and politically unstable. We are within, I think, months of the plug being pulled on Putin's fridge. Putin's gamble to outlast Ukraine and the West is looking desperate, more desperate by the day. If Russia's economy continues to downward spiral, and its allies continue their silent withdrawals, it may not be long before the real battle Putin has to fight is not in Ukraine, but at home, in his own backyard. And the question remains, is Russia prepared for a war of its own making, fought not just on the battlefield, but within its own borders? That's the question. And who will be blamed? Putin. Putin, hiding in a fridge, or dead in a fridge. The iced lolly that nobody can lick, or nobody thought they could lick him. I think he's meeting his match at the moment. Putin is leaking. The fridge is no longer. You know, when you've got something so solid as a Putin in the fridge, you can't quite close the door. Everything leaks in time. And with a little bit more of a barrage from Ukraine, that fridge is going to be prized open, and Putin is going to flop out.